Hey, just a couple more classes left in Unit 2. The main thing today is authentication. We'll talk a little bit about authorization just because it usually goes hand in hand, but we're focusing on authentication. Again, this is very busy with words. I'm going to try to go one at a time through these and explain just the brief understanding of them. And then some of them I'll dive into a little bit more, and then some of them I'll try to wait until we talk about them actually in the code part. But something they don't talk too much about is authorization. So whenever you get a job, one of the key important things that they're going to talk about is auth. And when they say auth, unfortunately, they could be talking about authentication or authorization, but usually they're talking about both. So when you hear auth, you should not assume that they're talking about one versus the other. You should assume that they're talking about both as a whole. Authentication is proving you are who you are. So when you log in, that's authentication. You are authenticating. You're proving that you, the person sitting at the computer, is the person that you say you're logging in as. So authentication is that username, password. It can be your Google authentication. Most of you have probably said, hey, do you want, when it says sign in, there's like, I think Google's is red, and you click the red button that says sign in with Google. That's another way of doing authentication. They're just using Google's authentication rather than their own authentication. But that's saying, hey, you are who you are. Your username and password, and or the two-factor authentication. They might send you a code, and then you have to type in a code. So authentication is proving that you are who you are, where authorization is allowing you, as whomever you are, the authority to do certain things on the website or on the application. So if I'm a normal user, I have access to these 5 tabs. But if I'm an admin, I have access to the admin dashboard that then I can go in and delete users. But normal users don't have that authorization to delete other users. So authorization is usually roles and or grants and or permissions. There's several different names for it, but roles and permissions are usually the two actual technical terms for authorization. So again, when you say auth, which you'll hear me say a lot, it's usually meaning kind of both. I kind of bundle them together, but they are two separate thought processes. Sometimes your authentication service also gives you your roles at the same time, and sometimes not. Sometimes you handle your authorization inside your service and not at the authentication level. So that's another reason why they're separated, because they're not always together. Now let's talk about authentication. There's a thing called just simple authentication. This is, you're going to sign in using a username and password, and bam, you're into the system. So that's pretty simple. There's the picture that's going to come along with it here in a little bit that I will explain this more. Sessions and cookies. Session and cookies represent a very similar thing. The session usually lives on the server, while cookies live on the client machine or in your browser. So here in a little bit, I'll actually show you in my running app, and they showed you the same thing in the textbook, but you can see your session ID, and that session ID kind of says, okay, you are this session, we are in this session right now, and that session contains lots of information such as the user that is seeing the system right now. So your session is stored on the server though, and your cookies are stored on your browser. When you start messing with cookies too much, I can go into my cookies on my browser and start messing with them. So cookies are not always secure. So just make sure that if you store things in cookies, you still have to validate the cookies if you return them, because they might have harmful data or incorrect data, or but sessions are always stored on the server and are verified. They briefly talk about Spring security. If you go into a development environment, this simple authentication will not pass the needs of a modern application anymore. For your project in Unit 3, you are absolutely encouraged to use simple authentication, because to learn all the authentication and authorization things needed to do the next step, it takes a lot. Also, whenever you go in, you will never be asked as an entry-level person to work on authentication and authorization. You just won't ever be. That's more of a senior level role. So usually even an architect role, because your company will have somebody that's kind of in charge of that at a high level and just tells you what to do to implement it on your program. So that's another reason why LaunchCode is not going to spend a lot of time on that. That's something you learn on the job with other people. Hopefully you're hearing the same theme over and over again. There are several things that you need to know about whenever brought up in an interview, but you don't need to know the itty bitty things of it, because you aren't expected to know everything. You're expected to know the basics of a lot of things, so that whenever you get in the job and the company teaches you how they want to do things, you are able to learn that. You're not behind. But on the other hand, you don't need to know every little thing, because every company does it slightly different. So Spring Security, it's another Spring package that as soon as you enable Spring Security, it locks down your service for you. So I probably won't show it today, but if you bring that in and then run your service and try to go to your website, it'll block you out of your own website. It expects a username or password. And so whenever you do that, it does give you a password. Like whenever you do your console log, it'll give you a password, and that would be the password for the user. It's a whole other thing. On the other hand, if you're using Java applications, you are going to run into Spring Security. So you might just, if you want to brush up on that. The more important understanding concept, no matter if you're in Java or .NET or React or whatever language you're in, is OAuth. I don't think that they quite do a good service. It would be a good suggestion to learn just the basics of what OAuth really does. But that is the standards and guidelines that most people follow for authentication nowadays. And technically, we're on OAuth version 2, which does a double link back and forth. And so you might look into OAuth workflows. And there's been, to be honest, if I remember, I never bookmark it, but there's a really good OAuth website I've seen before. I just can't remember off the top of my head. If I find it, I'll send it out. But it has you go through and it logs you in and it talks where you are in the OAuth workflow. Encryption. Encryption is very, very important. Whenever I send something across the internet, if somebody grabbed packets of my information that's getting sent, they should be encrypted. Well, how do I know they're encrypted? Well, with HTTP, there's that HTTPS. That S at the end means that it's secure. That means you're using SSL. That usually means that you're using what they call TLS, transport layer security. These are all networking concepts that are very important security for engineers to know. You don't have to know every little thing about it, but you need to know at least what's going on. For instance, I think I've told you I'm not in a traditional web development team right now. I'm in an internal team where I am doing web development, but I'm also, just today, I had to log into a Microsoft SQL server and change the security settings of the TLS and SSL on that server. That was part of my job. It's not coding. It's just I knew enough about it to then Google the rest and ask the right people the rest. And I was able to do the thing that was asked from our business for somebody in our realm to do, and that it just got done. So oftentimes, you knowing a lot of information allows you to work with other teams and get other stuff done, including encryption, this security stuff. It is good to know this, even if we're not coding it. So encryption, the two-way, that's what SSL is all about. Whenever my browser says, hey, I want to go to google.com, I go out to a DNS server and I say, hey, I want to go to google.com. It sends me out to Google. Google says, okay, are you really an okay person? Or are you not? Here, let's use this this key. And I can go out, my browser knows where all these keys are stored, and it goes and it grabs Google's key, a public key, and it pulls it down to my browser, and it says, okay, Google, the next time I talk to you, I'm going to encrypt everything I do through this key, so that whenever somebody tries to grab it in the middle, it doesn't look like plain English. It looks like some gibberish. But because I'm using Google's key, once Google gets it, since it's a two-way, Google doesn't use the same public key to decrypt it. They have to use a private key to decrypt it, and they've set up. And then whenever they use their private key to decrypt it, it comes back as normal English language, and they know what I'm talking about. And then anytime they send something back to me, they send it through their private key, which then I can actually decode with my public key. So there's two separate keys that have to be in the middle of that transportation for it to work. That goes back and forth. Now, technically, encryption with two-way, you could just have one key. You could do the old, is it like Caesar cipher, where I take every single letter in the alphabet and I move it by 5 letters. And as long as everybody knows which way I'm doing that, it goes two ways, meaning whenever I send it out, somebody can decrypt it, and then whenever somebody sends it my way, I can decrypt it, and it can go back and forth. And there's only one correct answer either way. That's, I think, the important part that they were trying to enforce on the two-way, where the one-way means that if I send it one way, you will not always be able to decrypt it. That one way might have 7 different possibilities. It might have 100 different possibilities if you decrypted it. One of the best ways to do one-way encryption is hashing. I'll explain this in a little bit. The next slide's blank, and I'm going to try my best to explain a hashing algorithm. Not a good one I made up, but hopefully it at least makes common sense on what hashing really is. So this hashing, that we can do that for passwords because it is secure enough. But hopefully you read in there that if I put my password down and somebody else had a different password, there is a possibility, like a 1 in whatever chance, but there is a possibility that my password and their password being different passwords would actually hash to the same exact hash. So it's interesting, and that means that it's one way. One way means if it goes one way, it's mapped one way, but then on the way back, it could be actually mapped 5 different ways or multiple different ways. And so you really don't know what the answer is. So that's one-way encryption means that one way it always works, the other way it doesn't always work. Something we are going to be doing in code is we're going to set up a user model. If you remember in my fitness tracker, I already have a user model. I'm going to modify it just a little bit to meet the needs of what we're doing. I'm going to create an authentication controller and copy and paste a lot of that code that LaunchCode did into mine. I might put it in a different location, but it's still the same code. We also need to create session handling utilities. So that's those filtering and I forgot the other one, but there's 2 files that we gotta handle. And then I put question marks on the login form DTO and registration form DTO. I was trying to think of a way that I could not need those. And I still think I might have found one, but I didn't have enough time to test it before today. So I'm going to just copy and paste what they did. So I will have a login form and a registration form DTO. But I might eventually show you a different way. Request filtering. This is again, another concept that you don't really need to know how to program as much as when you're debugging. So as an entry-level person, I would not ever make you do a pre, post, or after handle filtering. But if there is a problem somewhere and the company has pre-handles, I don't see a lot of post-handle, but usually it's pre-handle and after completion. And it's usually just pre-handle, to be honest. if the company has those filterings in there, I would expect you to know what those at least are. Not that you would program it yourself, but that you could see it and be like, oh yeah, I remember this is ran before the handling of a web request. So I'll talk about that and also in a little bit. And then the authentication filter is just that request filter. It's just through authentication. So request filtering is generic, where authentication filter is a request filter. And we are creating a pre-handle to handle those requests. So I'll try to draw that out as well. And then whenever you go and you make a pre-handle and you say, hey, when somebody goes to my site, they need to be authenticated. So send them to this login, because that's what we're going to be doing. There are some forms or some pieces, some request endpoints, the / event or whatever. Whatever endpoint you want for a non-authenticated person to use, you can whitelist them, and then they can still access those, but not the other ones. And whitelisting is a common technology term, not just for web requests, but whenever I was working in AWS, I had to actually take my home IP address and put it on a whitelist so that I can access that stuff, because even my username and password would not get me into certain situations. They wanted to lock it down so much that you had to be on the approved IP address list, or else you couldn't get access. So we had to whitelist. It allows access to whatever resource you're telling it. Right. So keep me honest here. I'm going to try to do two things. It's the hashing and the request filtering is what I'm going to try to draw here. Right. So the hashing. Right. Can I draw? Yeah. There we go. So let's say with hashing, it's this algorithm. So here's my hashing algorithm. This hashing algorithm can be anything. And of course, computers can run algorithms so fast that whenever we're talking about security, this hashing algorithm is a very, very complicated procedure, but the computer can run it super fast. But since my brain cannot handle that, we are going to do it slightly different. We are going to do a very simple algorithm that says our hashing algorithm is the input that comes in, the output will be the number of characters. That's all. Again, this is not secure at all, but it's just for the idea of it. So if I said that if I put in password, like I spelled out password, because that's the most secure password, my hashing algorithm would say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it would say that it was 8. So password would be 8. So whenever you would hash this, and let's think about it as LaunchCode was doing with actual passwords, what would get stored in the database is 8. That's what would get stored in the database. And if I said that my input was Phil with 2 L's, then my output would be 5. So whenever I typed in my password, if my actual password that got saved in the database was password, and I typed in Phil, it would say, hey, you don't have the correct password. But it's not knowing that I typed in password and Phil, it checked the 5 with the 8 and said, are those the same? This is why it's one way. Because if I was given the 8, could I ever predict with 100% certainty what their password was? And no, I couldn't, because there are multiple 8-character words. So whatever my hashing algorithm is, is not supposed to be two-way. It's supposed to be one way. And again, it's a huge complex. It adds things in. It does all these crazy things, all this kind of stuff to your characters. It, changes it to, a different, even like character stream, all these kind of things. You don't know exactly what it does. And that's one reason why bcrypt, which is the encryption service that we use, is so powerful, because hackers try to look at this and see if they can backwards engineer it to this. That's what hackers try to do. And if you have a good hashing algorithm, they can't do that. On the other hand, what they've also decided is if we encode it one way, we don't want hackers to be able to go backwards. So we are purposely making it so that if they do find a possibility, meaning 8 and password, and they find that backwards compatibility, well, this 8 could also mean something else. So maybe your password was password, but maybe it was some other 8-character word. So hashing is just one way. You cannot go backwards. You cannot assume what the password is based on the hash algorithm. That's how hashing is in general. So let's go for another hashing thing. When we talk about a hashed set, you guys have seen the word hash in some of our things, right? In Java. When they say it's a hashed set or a hash whatever, what they are doing is they're doing the same exact thing. They have a hashing algorithm, and that they put it into what we would consider a bucket. So not talking about passwords. If I'm talking about just words, and I have this hashing algorithm, now we're talking about data structures and search and sort, more complex things, and I feed in words here, what it does is it has an algorithm and it says, okay, that word, go put in this bucket. Oh, this other one, let's go put in this bucket. And again, because two things coming into the hashing algorithm could technically go into the same bucket, that's fine. The cool thing about searching, though, is when I say, hey, search on this thing, unfortunately, it can't find the one item, but it does limit their number of things they have to search dramatically. So if I have 100 different buckets, it only has to search through 100 different buckets. It knows what bucket to start with because of the hashing algorithm. So it starts in that bucket and it cuts out all the extra noise. It knows it has to go there. So if you start getting into data structures and actually search and sort algorithms, even though you don't actually code them, it is very impressive to engineering managers and high-level engineers that you know what those are. So that's, if you want to show off some skills, look up sorting, look up searching, look up what hashing really is. It cuts down your time on whenever you search and sort. Anyway, started to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I definitely want to give you more information because this is something that was asked to me in my interview. But again, my interview was conducted by my team that was in San Jose, which they have California mentality in interviewing. So if you're going to interview if you're going to interview nationally, you would easily be asked with a search sort data structures question. That's very common nationally. If you do it more locally, they know that their talent is more local. They care about personality and characters, and they still need you to do your job, but they care about something slightly different. They're not trying to filter out the top engineers across the nation. They're wanting somebody they can rely on, dependable. So anyway, what was the other? The other thing was this filtering. Nice. So I'm going to try my best to explain this. Whenever I say go to, I don't even know I'm going to say fitness.com, right? event. You can make up your own endpoint. It does not matter what this is, but this is an endpoint you're trying to go to. When you go to this, it goes to your Java server. So this is my Java stuff. And it's technically a servlet, but a Java servlet. When it goes in here, the first thing it does is it goes through some filters. You guys can all read that, right? That's filters. So it goes through some filters. This screens out what's coming in. You know how you use a filter for almost anything out? Like you're doing is you're trying to get things out that you don't need to be there. And so one of the key filters we have is an authentication filter. But in Java, I wish I remembered how to do this because I actually had to do it before. The company that we use for a vendorized product uses filters, and they show us how to use filters in a unique way to do what we need to. So I actually had to for a couple things do this. But the filter, it accepts the request. Now, you know your controller is over here. This is your, hey, go do this. This is what we are coding right now. This is your controller, and it says, give me the event, all the information, right? This is your public string method right here. Before it can hit this, it has to go through filters. And the first thing it does is it hits all the pre-handles of all of them. There are already built-in filters in Java servlets. There's already there, they already do it. You are building an extra filter to go in there. There is a way to arrange the filters. And if you ever do get into Spring Security, it is kind of important in Spring Security to know which filter you're at, to know should your authentication be in front of these other filters or should it be in behind these other filters. But there is an order, and if you don't do an order, it will just do them. But there has to be an order. They don't run at the same time. They go one filter by one filter, and they run all the pre-handles. The pre-handles have to return true or false. That's what they have to return, because true says it passed my filter, it's good to go to the next one. The false says, nope, this is bad, shut it down here. Inside the filter, though, not just the return, you can build more things into this request. So remember, there's headers and a body inside of a request. And I will go over this again a little bit on this part. I will not go over filters on Monday, but I'll go over the request headers and bodies whenever I get to Postman. And so when you send now your browser does most of this for you, but your browser sends a request and it has headers and body, and this filter through the pre-handle can either add or remove or even do other Java actions based on those headers or bodies. So I could say, hey, if this is coming in from this certain IP address, go do this other thing. You can set it up to do whatever you want to. You have full control over what this kind of does, but you look inside, it's a sneak peek inside the headers and body, and you do something to it or evaluate based on it, anything you want to do. What we are going to do is we are going to say, hey, does these headers and body have a session? That's what we're looking for. And if it doesn't have a session, hey, we need to go make a session first. Well, how do we make a session? Well, let's go send them to the login page. So that's what our filter, this pre-handle, is going to do, is say, it's going to look inside this request, and if it doesn't have a session, we need to go do that. Now, that's the most common case. You have lots of pre-things. You can have a lot of pre-filters. Post, I think it's the post, actually goes right here. It says, hey, I'm going to go to the handle, but then what do you want me to do once I'm there? So it goes right inside there, and then the after is on the way out. So as your request is going back out to the browser, your after goes here. I don't see a lot of these post filters, post handles, mainly because my controller is going to do a lot of that for me. I did see an example somewhere where, let's say that you You wanted to include your brand on everything. And so you wanted inside the request body to always have your name there. That could be a post or it could be an after, either way. It doesn't matter. But then it's always, you know, that somewhere in the stream, your name gets attached to that body. And then whenever they get it, they know it's you. They know whatever you want to send in there. So hopefully that kind of helps with the filters. They are literal filters. And then the handle is usually the pre is actually filtering, where the post and the after is kind of the later term. I'm going to keep going. If you have questions, ask them. Also, if you're like, I have questions, but I don't know how to word them, I'll be around. Authentication. These are things from the book. I wanted to just add a little bit to it. Simple authentication. You have a login page. We've done that. You're going to set your username or password, and it's going to say, hey, are those good? This is accessing your database for a simple one. And if the credentials did not match, you go back to the login screen. And if they did match, you're able to access whatever page you're supposed to get to. And to be honest, even the extended authentication pieces still flow like this, but there's a lot of other stuff in between these. So every time you should be thinking about having some way to authenticate a login page, checking, and then directing traffic depending on which one. This is session and cookies. So the authentication, this is remember, this is this part right here. So what we are going to be looking at is all of this space that's in between here. That's what we're looking at now. Okay? They already typed in their username and password. The credentials passed. Okay, now they want to see the page, but the page is way down here. This is all that space in between. So the first thing it does is the server checks. It says, oh, is this person good? Did I check the database? Is my username and password correct? Yes, it's good. Okay. The first thing the server is going to do is it's going to create a session. That session is stored on the server. That ID is stored on the server. And for the near future, because you can time out of these, so they only last for so long, but this session is now going to take place of them having to type in their username or password every time. They've already done that. So this session stores that information for us. And it's stored per client accessing it. So if I typed in my username or password, it creates a session. But even on that same box, somebody else from a different browser can log into that same box, and it knows that we're different. Now, the easiest way for it to know that we're different is to create a cookie in my browser. So then it stores on my browser my session ID, where the other person, it would store their session ID on their cookie browser. And then that cookie is sent and lives on the client. And remember, the client is the person trying to access the information, and oftentimes is the browser. So even though we do talk about the client as a person, most of the time we're actually talking about the machine. So the client isn't actually me, even though I'm the one doing it. The client in most contexts is the machine. So it's the browser or the machine. And then once those session and cookies are created, they can access the restricted page. So now this, again, is all this space in between here. Now they've logged in and now they can see stuff. Now what? So here is how it keeps replaying. This should be kind of like a loop. So we authenticated, we created our session, we created our cookie. I don't always like this picture per se, but let's say that we go to the home page. As soon as we go to the home page, it is going to look at our cookie. That's the first thing it's going to do. And if the cookie does not exist, it's going to send us over to the login page. So the reason I don't like this template is because I think most people do read top left to bottom right, and it makes it seem like we actually start with authentication, but they, by their words, are like, hey, it goes to the home page and wants the restricted page. So I like that we're starting here. The interesting part about this, if you can see, it's almost circular though, because if the cookie does exist, I don't have to go to this login page. If the cookie exists, I actually go over here to the server. So the reason this is different is when I try to access the home page, if I have a cookie, it checks with the session, and then the session says, yep, you're good, so then go to the restricted page. So this cookie and session are always talking kind of back and forth. Hope that makes a little more sense. All right. Again, this was a lot of information. Let me see if there's any other. I think that was everything. All right. I'm going to go into the 2 questions that were posted on Discord and try to explain those. There's a lot of words on the page, and that's mainly because I didn't have a lot of time to prep for these. Again, that's not a huge concern because I do know how to answer them, but I didn't have a chance to reword this. So someone was trying to relate this at override. When we're dealing with inferences, usually we use the at override because we're overriding a method that already exists. And so how does that at override work with the find by username that's inside our user repository, right? So a couple things. First of all, this method, find by username, does not actually exist on the CRUD repository. It doesn't. So I don't actually override anything. That's a little confusing because, well, I didn't actually tell it what to do. It says find by username, and I put no implementation in this thing. So what is it even doing? And that's where this Spring data comes in, and it works like magic. It looks, and you created a bean, a repository bean, and that repository bean, because it is one, and that it's extending by either the CRUD repository or the JPA repository, either one of these will do that. So because it's extending something, it knows that when it finds a random, and I'm going to say random because it does not know what this is before you push the play button. When you do this, it looks inside that file, inside that bean, and it looks here. And if it matches the naming convention set up by Spring Data, it will build this query for you. So you're not overriding anything. You are technically building a SQL query right here by this one line here. The naming convention, you do need to look these up if you're going to do anything different than this. But find by is a select. It's a select all. And it says where username equals the username that you put in. This username here, this, whatever you put here, has to exactly match one of your property names in, it's technically not that user, it's whatever your user repository is. So your user repository is talking about users because you've mapped them in the method header. This field name has to map inside your user object, your model, or else this will not work and it will throw an error. But this creates the select all where username equals this. If I didn't know the full username, I could actually say find by username, and I can say contains. And instead of doing a username equals username, it would do a username contains. So it would do a like with a wildcard. So it knows how to build those things for you. Spring does that, Spring Data. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. It is getting defined on build. So whenever you say run and it's building everything and mapping all these beans everywhere, it will automatically create this SQL query for you. When I'm generating setters and getters with fields for annotations, this one I was a little confused on, so I'll explain what I can think of, and then maybe you can figure out. Also, this did not copy and paste as well as I thought. Okay, so let's visually. This is the method, get username. These annotations should not, in my opinion, should not be on a setter or a getter. These validations, the at not null, at not blank, at size, should be on the property at the very top at the field and not on a getter. So that's why I'm confused on this a little bit. But I think if the question is, do we want to include the annotations? I think yes, especially for LaunchCode, for graded assignment stuff. They want annotations in there. They want validations in their code. So you do want to include these annotations, but they should be at the string, private string username, not at the method. I think Spring technically allows you to do it at the method, but that's not where you should. By default, you need to put them at the top. Auto generators, setters, getters will put those into the arguments. Yeah, and those will eventually get kind of imprinted on the arguments. Yes, they will automatically put them. Yes, they do a lot of magic. That's why you put them at the top, so that they do all the work for you and put them where they need to. Thursday, be kind, be have grace with Lexi, because I don't think Lexi has a Zoom Pro license that LaunchCode gave me because they knew I was going to be hosting all these lectures. So Lexi, you may or may not get the same level of communication to get into Lexi's lecture that you would from me, and know that that's not because they're trying to do anything weird. That's just because they haven't worked out the logistics. I'm going to reach out to Lexi hopefully on Wednesday to make sure she has everything she needs, and then also Jamarco to make sure that they have everything. But Thursday, plan on Lexi lecturing. Try to be there a little earlier, knowing that it is just a set and get and or a Q&A. You don't have to have your computer with code and be all prepped and ready. Just show up with questions, but try to be there a little bit more on time. And then she's supposed to be answering things about liftoff. Here's the unfortunate part. I won't be there. And I want to know this information. So I will try to reach out to her to see what you guys hear. But to be honest, I learn more from your guys' questions and how people answer them than I do from whatever information they present at the beginning. Because that presentation at the beginning, there's a lot of assumptions that I think all of us kind of make. Please ask those questions. And then at some point, I'll need to get that information to make sure that I understand as well. So I am going to ask her to record. Now, again, where is she going to post that? I don't know. Probably not on YouTube. If I was her, I would not post that on YouTube, but I would try to post it on our Discord channel. So again, I'm going to try to work with her on doing those kind of things, and or Jamarco, because Jamarco might have the license to host meetings. So he might have to actually start the meeting and then deal with the recordings and stuff. But I will ask for her to record. Well, I've already asked that. We'll see how things go. Just know that technology is always a struggle. So, yeah. And then after she lectures, which I'm not expecting her to lecture, but not too long, then you'll break into Studio, and the Studio is to get your stuff done. again, I won't be around to help. So please reach out to your IAs during that actual time. But then many of you know that you can reach out to me anytime. I'll get back to you when I can. I will try to work with you whenever I can. So definitely reach out to me if your IA doesn't respond. When we asked you to be kind, because many people get frustrated, and to be honest, lecturing in front of a bunch of people and getting questions can be frustrating for even the person getting asked the questions. And to be honest, it is perfectly normal and acceptable that stress is a little higher. This is a project. It is a big deal. You should be stressed and nervous about it, but you should know how to, or you should be learning how to deal with that stress. But whenever you have like there's 105 people on this call right now, when you have 105 people stressed about what does this mean? We just found out that we're going to be thrown in, and did they tell you that you guys are going to be randomized? Yeah. The level of stress just from that one thing was like, okay, that's much higher, right? So I think instead of asking the why questions, I would just ask the how questions. What do they want? What do they expect? What should the outcome be? LaunchCode is very much an educational institution, and they run themselves like that. So just think about how education is. There's rubrics, there's structure, there's whatever. And structure your questions like that. Leave the, well, when is this going to happen in the real world questions to me. So come with those with me. You can ask them on the channel, and I can answer those on Monday, next Monday. So if she says something and you're like, Lexi said that LaunchCode does it this way, does this mimic real world, or how does this fit in the real world? Please come with those questions. I don't get flustered. I was a high school teacher for so long. There's nothing you can say or do that will get me so flustered that I'll get upset. So ask those questions. And if you don't want to ask them out loud, message me then. That's fine too. So I know that you guys are naturally kind. I'm not saying that you guys are not kind. I'm just saying be extra cautious of the questions that you ask. That's more or less what it is. It isn't like being kind as much as be thoughtful of the questions that you ask, knowing. Also, Lexi's not technical. So if you ask, well, how are we supposed to implement Java? She's going to say, I don't know. She's not technical. She's part of the more educational side. So anyway, you guys will be fine. I just have to, I like to cover my bases. Last point, next Monday is our last class. I'm going to lecture about REST. I'm going to show you Postman. I'm going to do some other things, and I'm hoping that you guys give me things to teach on as well, meaning you guys post questions that then I can answer. So I think we're running perfectly on time for coding. All right. Was there anything in here? Pre-handle, post-handle, after. Yeah. All right. I am going to try my best to copy and paste, but also show you what I'm doing. So if I go a little too fast, let me know. I don't mind redoing it. Again, I'm going to do a couple things. The first thing I'm going to do is show you my app again. I'll zoom in this eventually, but I'm going to hit the play button right now. No, I want the whole thing. All right. So remember, this is my fitness tracker app. It is not what LaunchCode did. It's what I made a full stack application last time on. When I run this, and I go to localhost 8080, it says, welcome to fitness tracker. If I go to users, it tells me my users. I'll mess with these in a second. It gives me my profiles, which my profile has first name, last name, age, weight, height, username. I'm going to change this email. That's why they're blank here. I'm going to change this email to password and then push the email into the profile. And so that's what I'm going to do in front of you. And then activities, the thing that I did not show in front of you, and I was like, why didn't I do this? I didn't display the tags here. And then whenever I created the tags, I actually created the links. So do you see how there's two ones that have good and two ones that have bad? When I click the good tag, it shows both of the good ones. If I hit the bad, it'll show both the bad ones, so that I can filter based on tags here. I create new activities, and then with the tags, I can also filter based on here. So the view activities, this link right here is the same thing that whenever I do there and I click there. So the only additional thing I did from Thursday was this column right there, but the functionality I just stole from right here and put it in here. Right. That's where we left it last time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, just to get our feet wet, LaunchCode had hashtags before here, and I was like, that's kind of cool. So let's just get in our feet wet. Let's add hashtags. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, since this is on the list, the activity list, and my tag name is right here, I can just go ahead and put a hashtag right here with a plus sign. Remember, when you do this, it's kind of like JavaScript, so you sometimes have to add different things. You do not need to memorize syntax as much as be able to play around with this, and when you run it and it's like, oh, it errors out, well, it must be this other thing, and or copy and paste it and Google it. But I think this is the right syntax. So whenever I rerun this, I'm just looking for that hashtag right there. Oh, and there's the hashtag. So I just made my tags a lot cooler, but in my tags, I don't want to store the hashtag because I don't want to store the hashtag in the database. I just want to show it and display it. So anyway, right. Next thing I want to do is make it so that my username and my email go other places. So I want my user and profile, again, my user, my email. I don't want my email on my user anymore. Not my username. I don't want my email on my user because that's how they log in. And I want them to log in using their username. Now, I could just get rid of their username and make their username be their password. That is a technology decision, an architecting decision. You can do however you want to, but I don't want username and email on my user. So I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to put it right here. Because I did that, you can see some errors here. That's because I had my setters and getters. I'm just going to go ahead and move them right over here. So now I have setters and getters. And then this is what I'm hoping to teach you by doing this. Another reason why I'm doing this. You should be thinking about data as it flows through the system, such as the email. If I change the email how I want it to be in the database, I'm going back to front. So on the back, my email is now in my profile. Well, where does profile even end up? So profile needs to be shown to them. So we're doing the model, the view and the controller, right? The model, view, and controller. The controller, the cool thing about doing this, my controller doesn't need to change because it is sending the profile as a whole. So I don't have to do the controller, but I do have to change the views. So on my profile form, I need to add email because I'm asking for it. So right after last name probably. And this is going to be email, 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 email. And it has to match that. So I just double check that it all matches that. So now I can get the email, and now I got to display the email. So I did it right underneath last name, So this is going to be email. Just the, don't do insert. Okay. That won't show, but it's just there to kind of give you a hint there. And then I also, again, this is just a brush up on like, whenever you're thinking about data, your data actually goes in several different places. So you got to think about all these different locations. I think back to front, but you can think front to back. It doesn't matter. But I got to push this profile email up. But then I also took away the user one. So on the user, I don't want email anymore. On the other hand, what do I want on the user? I want a password. So I want a password. And I'm going to follow their technique. It's going to be, I'm going to call it hashed password. We'll see how much I mess this up by doing this, but then I'm going to do the setters and getters. So again, I just added an attribute. Now I need to flow it all the way up so that the user can see it. So the first thing I need to do is do setters and getters. And I'm not encrypting yet. I know that in the back of my mind that I need to do that, but I'm not doing that yet. And so user, I've already done all the profile stuff. I'm going to get rid of that. So the user form, I don't need that as much. So hashed password, I'm just going to make everything hashed password. So on the user form, instead of email, it's going to be hashed password, hash password. The field is this. The errors would be this. Everything matches. And again, the reason why I didn't copy and paste is because I already had email there. But then I also need a verified one, don't I? Well, not right now. We will add that. I'm trying to teach you also iteration. I need to test this before I move on. So I'm going to test what I can first, and then I'm going to move on. And this is super insecure. Don't ever do this unless if you're testing. But to make sure that this is accurately working, hopefully you guys are not showing their password up to the user, but I'm just working about user flow, right? This is one way to see if I have any breaking of my code. That's all I care about. Did I accurately get this to not break? So this doesn't have a hash password because whenever I made these users, I didn't have one, right? So that's not in there. Profile. It has my email over here then. Yeah, it properly brought my email over. That's because I already had it there anyway. So let's do add a new user, username. All right, this is why I wanted to show it, because if I'm having messages and errors here, I will have errors later on. So you don't want to drop all that code that LaunchCode tells you to without testing it part way, because then you may not know what's going on. So it did not actually add my user. So let's debug this. It says down here that something's wrong. It says hashed password. That's weird. Check my cheat sheet for a second. I think that's literally all I did. That's great. Hashed password.
I should have an empty one. I have an empty one. Did I not do the setters and getters? Did I not do a setters and getters? Is that what I'm forgetting? No, it says I already did them. All right. So then let's go back over here. I have too many tabs open. Close all tabs. Let's go back to my user controller. This is save user, right? So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to put a debugger and I'm going to debug this thing. Oh, the other thing I'm going to do, did you see how I changed something to my database? The other thing that may or may not be right, I bet you that this might have something to do with it. Instead of dropping my tables, I go over here and hit create. This will drop my tables for me. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and maybe it works just because I'm going to drop my tables. I will not have any more users, but this is getting, oh, that's get all users. I'm going to mute this for a second and hit play. So I'm going to add a user. Yeah, I bet you that was it. Do you see how that worked just fine that time? It's probably because I had a database issue that had different columns with this, and it didn't know how to map them. So that's what was going on. But do you see how my hash password's there? So let's go ahead. I don't know why that's. Fine. Let's make sure the profiles work. All right. So those seem to work. So now let's get more secure. Yes, sometimes you might actually have to run this twice to get the create thing to work. I don't think I'm going to change my database. I'll keep it create for a little bit. So I'm going to run this again here in a second. Okay, so now let's actually start adding in some of the stuff that LaunchCode said to add. The first thing I want to do is whenever my user creates a password, I want it to be secure. So inside my user object, the thing they told me to bring in was this private static final. I'm just going to put it right here. This bcrypt password. And if you look, if I try to automatically bring this in, it doesn't know anything about this. In all the libraries that I've told it to use right now, this is not in one of those libraries. So the first thing I have to do is actually add access to that library. So this build Gradle, these are all the things that I have said, go look inside these things and use whatever you can find. But there's one that that it needs for that, and that is this one. That's the security, not just Spring Security, because if you do that, it'll bring in all of Spring Security and your app will be almost too secure where you won't even be able to log into it. So we are going to do the just bringing in the encryption stuff. But like many of you noticed, this amazing elephant up here with the reload button, you can click this. If that button wasn't there, you can go up to your Gradle one and hit this reload. Either way, the Gradle reload. But what that does is it now tells IntelliJ, you have access to more libraries now. Go index them so that you can actually analyze them now. So now whenever I go over here, it says import class, and it actually imported the class, and it imported it from security crypto, which is the thing I just brought in. So it knows what it is now. And not only that, but I want to make sure that it actually looks, it actually encrypts the stuff, because that's the other problem, is it doesn't always encrypt it. So I'm gonna have to change this. I copied and pasted. I'm going to change the things. Instead of allowing Spring to create the user automatically, I actually need to control it a little bit more. So I'm going to create my own constructor. I'm going to create my own constructor to actually make the user now. This gives me more control. The other thing I'm going to do is whenever I do the password, where is the password? Oh, I accidentally put them up here. Hold on. That's why I'm lost. I always put fields, then constructors, then setters and getters. I just have always done that. So whenever we get the hash password, it's just going to be the hash password. But just like we did here, when we set the hash password that's coming in, I want you to go ahead and get used to doing the same thing down here, where I want, if for some reason it sets it automatically, I want it to use the encoder to encode it. I don't know if it actually told you to do that or not, but this is, anytime it sets the hash password, I want it to encrypt it. So I make it because actually with it, okay. It's because I don't want to create the user automatically. In my controller, I need to make sure that the passwords, the two passwords they put in there, matched. And then because I'm breaking it out of its normal cycle of creating, actually, I should be able to just pull the user. This is what I was thinking about, not having to do the DTO, the login DTO. This is my process that I didn't have time to think through, because you're right. You got me on that track that I was thinking on, where I can just use this user and create a user and not do the DTO, and just use this. And then it would use this set hash and actually use the encoder. And I think there's a way to do that. I just didn't have enough time to verify it. So I am going to keep going with what I was doing with using the constructor. But again, it is curious to me. I might do it this way. So the question that came in, this hash password right here, this is, you're right. This is technically not a hash password. This is just the password unhashed. So I can do that. This is coming in as a password, not the hash password. Okay. So again, I'm not doing login stuff right now. I just want to make it so that whenever I create a new user, the password gets hashed. That's all I'm doing here. Let me rerun this. Again, I'm trying to do this in steps. There we go. This is the hashed password. So my P Hodges turns into this. And I still don't want to display this to the world. So we're not going to do that, but I'll take away this view here in a second, but there you go. Now this is using my setter. It's not using my constructor. So for those of you who are like, well, why did you create a constructor? It's because it was already in my notes to do, but that's because of the login DTO that I need that. So now I'm going to go to the login DTO and do what LaunchCode was doing there with a login page. Okay, the flow here, just in case you guys are asking good questions. Going a little longer, but I have time tonight. I can stay here until whenever, but won't have as much time for the studio. All right. I don't know if I ran this on debugger, but what happens is the show new user form goes to my user/form, and my user/form is right here. And this is just a text and a text. I probably want to actually do a password right here. And to be honest, these are just passwords at these times. Even though you see the word hash password, this is all just strings. It's the P Hodges. It's not the $2. It's the P Hodges. And whenever this submits, it's going to submit to the /users as a post method. So then when I go back to here and I say save user, this is my post mapping on my user controller. So I don't have to say users because I have users up here in my request mapping. So it's my post mapping here. And I said, hey, go grab the user that is passed in by this user and then save it. I don't do any validation. I don't check that the password's correct. I don't check anything. I'm just passing it in right now. And eventually on the login, I'm going to actually pass in two things. I'm going to pass in the password and the verify password and check to see if those are the same. And then I'm going to check to see, more after that. So that's why we're going to create a DTO for that object. So instead of having a user DTO or a user object, we're going to have a login/registration DTO. For mine, when it does this binding right here, that's my setter, not the constructor, correct? That's the constructor we haven't used yet. I'm going to do that next. And, I'm trying to do as much as I can without doing the huge, long, because once I start the authentication stuff, it's hard to stop, I guess. Okay, well, let's get into it then. So the thing that they wanted you to do is they wanted to make sure that whenever you logged in, that you could actually log in. So the first thing I'm going to actually do is create the two DTOs, and these are copy and paste from LaunchCode. So, I mean, I don't mind going over them a little bit, but do not think that I'm doing anything special. This is the login. I'm literally looking at another screen that has exactly what LaunchCode has. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this. This is copy and paste from LaunchCode. Login form DTO. This is the username, the password. I did not copy and paste very well, but I think you get it. There's the login DTO. And then I need the register form DTO. And again, this one extends the login one. So on login, you don't need to verify their password. It's either right or wrong. On the register, you need to verify their password. So they have to type it in twice. And so there's a setter and getter for this, but it extends this, so it still has that. And whenever we want to display that, that's our model. So we need our controller. Our controller is going to be this authentication controller. Then And again, I'll actually go over some of this, but I think I copied and pasted this as well. This was a longer document. Now they had you copy and paste this in multiple sections. So let's go through some of this. So the first thing we did was we're bringing in the user repository because we do need access to the user. We need to see that if they're logging in, we need to retrieve the user from the database. And if they're registering, we need to save them into the database. I will explain that in a second too. So I'll come back to that. I'll show you that. This is kind of cool, this session. Okay, so here's your register. When you register, it's going to have a new registration form that says, I don't even know if I put a title in mine, but anyway, you register, and then once you register and hit save, it's going to see if there's any things. It's going to see if you're an existing user. So if your username's already in there, it's going to say, hey, if their username's already in there, reject it because they're already in there. Otherwise, you're going to get their password and verify password, and you're going to see that if those are the same. And if those are not the same, you're going to error out and say, hey, the passwords don't match. And then if they do, if they pass both of those, they're not in the database and their passwords match, you're going to create a new user. And remember, my user is getting their username and it's getting their password, and it saves them. This just saves them right into the database. Now, here is where the constructor comes in. This constructor right here, I'm going to show you. Hopefully it'll show you the redness. Let's say that I did not make this. This thing is now underlined in red because it does not have this constructor. Because it's not binding that user and creating that user only in Spring, because I am creating it in this line in my Java, I have to have the appropriate constructor or else it won't work. Why is it saying it doesn't like it? Oh, those are different errors. Sorry, I thought it was talking about this one. All right. That's why we had to make the constructors, because of this line right here. I wanted to make a new user. I wanted to manually make it with the username and password typed in, because I did not want to do a user model right here, because I may not have saved it. So I don't want to create it here. I want to create it manually and then do the save procedure on it. So there are ways to do that differently, and I do think that there might be a better way. But anyway, it also sets the user in the session. So I might explain this a little bit more later, but remember, we have a session. They logged in, we're creating a session, we're going to store them in the session, and then we're going to redirect them back to the home page. The login is the same thing. This find by username. Because we don't have it in our user repository yet, I need to create it. So I'm going to say public find by username string username. Void. Sorry. No, I don't want to return void. I want to return a user. There we go. And I guess I don't need public. Again, this right here is some Spring magic because it's a repository bean. It can look at this and it says find by. Okay, so I'm going to do a select SQL command. I'm going to find my username given my username. So it does that automatically. I think that's all I had there. Any other? What else is erroring? Come on. Oh, is matching password. So the user, which is the user repository. So the user, I don't think I created this this method on the user. So I don't think, yeah, I don't have the is matching password on here. Let's do that. That's not right. All right, here it is. Public Boolean is matching password. And this, I changed the name of that to hash password. All right. So this is saying if I encode these, if it does the encoded password match the hashed password. And if you wanted to look at these, this is your raw password, this is your encoded password. So that's the method there. All right. Anything else throwing off my code? All right. So I have a login screen. Let's run this and see what happens. All right. It works, I guess. If I go to users, add user. The link that I don't have in here yet is the login. That's what I had before. Do you know what I didn't create yet? A view for my login. Let's do that. I'm going to go to templates. I'm going to say new. I'm going to say time leaf, and I'm going to say login. And then I also need to set up a registration form. I'm pretty sure I just copied this right out of the book as well. So if you don't know what I'm copying here, let me know and I can show you a little bit. But again, did I spell that right? Yep. And now let me rerun it. Again, I have not forced it to log in yet. I haven't created that. That's a filter that I haven't created yet to force me to log in. I'm trying to show you the step. If you are working on unit 3, like if you're working on your own project and you pulled in everything that LaunchCode just told you to pull in and something isn't working right, it's hard to debug what's going on. It's hard to figure that out. So hopefully I'm showing you a way to do that. So log in. Here's my username, here's my password. Well, I haven't registered yet, so I need to go to the register. Okay, so now I registered. It says welcome. Let me show you. If I go to application, here's the cool thing here. In my cookies, this J session ID, that's my session ID that's stored inside my cookies. This value is a certain value there. And no matter where I click, it's the A91A, right? No matter where I click, it stays the same. Okay. Did I build out the log out feature? Log out. Hey. When I logged in again, do you see how the value changed? As my user changes, this J session will change. So this J session is holding my information. Now, it doesn't actually hold it there. It's just a key value that whenever it gets sent to my server, it holds certain information. So this is where, if I go to my authentication controller, actually, I can go to almost any of these. Did I try to get my session somewhere else? Is it just in the authentication controller? I'm trying. Okay, right here. Oh, that sets it. No, I want to actually see it. Get user from session. Okay, this is good. So when I hit this log out, I want to see what happens. I want to show you in IntelliJ what can go on here. I have my own programming thing that I might have time to show you. Man, this is running long. Whenever you run this again and I say login, and I type in my password, oh, I have it on here. I'm going to change that before I forget again. Do you remember how I changed this so it's always create? I need to change this back to update so I don't have to redo all this all the time. All right. All right, so I'm logged in. I put a breakpoint on the log out. Or did I? Did I hit the run or the debugger? Oh, I have it muted. Sorry, I have this mute breakpoints. Right, now I'm going to hit the log out. And it's going to stop. Okay. If at any point you can actually look at the HTTP servlet request, you can also look at the session, the HTTP session. Each of these are always passed in if you ask for them. And inside my request here, it gives me all of this stuff. And if I go down here and I look at the session, and it tells me different things about the session. Here's the ID, the 0457. I'm wondering if this will match this one. Oh, not that. Application. I guess I've already kind of logged out, maybe. This ID should kind of match. And so then that's the ID that it matches to know everything. And then if you look at attributes, here's my user, and it's telling me that the user that's logged in right now, it has an ID of 1. And if you looked up the ID of my user, it'd be 1. So it holds inside the session, it holds the user ID. So it knows who you are. All right. Let me just, I'm going to copy and paste lots of things. What else did I want to do? Okay. Got that, got that, got that, got that. The header. I'm just going through all of my things. In my fragments header, because I want them to be able to log out, I went ahead and added this log out text here. So now I have a log out link, so I don't have to hit it all the time. The other thing that that they said to do. So are we good that everything I've done, I've been doing in pieces. So you can log in, you can give the user a username or password, but still right now, I'm not forcing a login. I can just go to the website. So let's actually add something that forces us to go to the website. They added it right in here. I would probably add it. Nope, not a class. I would add it underneath a package. This could be utilities or security or anything that you wanted to make sure that you did it. I think when I originally did this, I put it under security. So I'm just going to do that again. But this could be any package name. It could be filters. And then we're going to create 2 filters. One's going to be an authentication filter. And I think I copied and pasted most of this, but I do want to show you it. Like I'll step through this just so you do have it. So this authentication filter, this does not implement it. It just creates a filter, but it never says when to use it. So that's why we need the second piece is to say when to use it. So I've auto-wired the user repository and the authentication controller. And then I've whitelisted these different login, register, log out. This is, I think, just copied and pasted. And then I have a Boolean asking, hey, is this a whitelisted path or is it not? So if it starts with whatever, if the path's in there, then it says true. If it's not in there, say false. Here's your pre-handle. This is what we're talking about. This actually runs when they call it, and it runs it before the controller runs. It runs before any controller runs. We're going to take the request and the response, which we always just kind of grab, and the request is the thing coming in, and we're going to say, hey, is the requested URL whitelisted? And if so, return true, means skip the filter. Just keep going. We're good. If not, you keep going. Then you're going to grab the session. Do they even have a session? If they do have a session, get the user from that session. And I showed you how, like, in the session that's managed in there, you're going to go grab the user. And if the user is null, if the user is not null, meaning I don't care what user right now, we're not looking at roles. We're just looking at authentication, not authorization. Authentication. Is there a user associated with the session or not? If they're not, if the user is not null, meaning if the user's not empty, then go ahead and log in. So you're going to keep going true. So if it's whitelisted, we're going to keep going. If the user is there, we're going to keep going. Otherwise, the response. So remember, this is the thing going back, back to the client. We're on the server. The response back says, hey, we're going to send this redirect to the login screen. And we're going to return false, meaning don't go through any other filters. We're going to go straight to this thing. So that's what this authentication filter does. And then we need to have a class that actually implements it, which they called, which is fine. I'm not upset with the following of this, is web application config. You could actually have multiple configurations in here. That's why it's fine if they call it this. Again, I'm used to Spring Security, and so we would have different configurations, but this is a configuration. So as you start up, it creates a bean. Remember, beans are something that Spring handles for us, and this is a web MVC configurer. So it's a configuration configurer, and this right here says, hey, set it as a bean. So now Spring knows about it. Set this authentication filter. So there's a question. So true just lets it continue through the other filters? Yes. So it filters like screening. So a pre-filter, if you say true, you keep going. If it's false, you reject it and you send it back. Register the filter with the Spring container. So this is the registry, this interception registry. Don't want to go into too much detail, but you not only have to add it as a filter, but actually as an interceptor. If somebody reminds me, I'll actually go over what's the difference between kind of this and this, but an interceptor is a filter. So this is like a two-step thing. I think I've seen it where these have been in one condensed thing. This right here allows Spring naturally to implement and create this for you, so you don't have to do anything else. So hopefully it's still Spring magic. Hopefully this one is the one that you need to make sense, because on your project, for your unit 3, whatever, you're probably going to copy and paste this just like it is. This is the one where you might change the whitelisting depending on what your thing wants. To be honest, a lot of the whitelisting might be done on your front end and not on your back end, but you'll still want to filter to make sure that a user is authenticated. So you're thinking through how would I might change this if I made it a separate service trying to authenticate in through here. So instead of doing it from the session ID, yeah. Is that all I needed? All right. I normally would just keep on rolling with this and go through this, but I'm going to show you one other thing that I did that was not asked, but I'm going to show you in my profile. So here's this. If I'm trying to make this secure and I've logged in and I have my profile and I add a profile, I should only see my profiles. So what I'm going to show you is just some code. It doesn't work perfectly because I don't have roles or anything, but I'm showing you inside my get all profiles. I think this will do it. Yeah. I can actually look at the HTTP session and get the attribute user. Remember, this is exactly what the filter was doing too, except it was going into the HTTP request. I'm just going in through the HTTP session, same thing. I'm going to the session, I'm getting the attribute of user. And if you remember, that thing did not return a user, it actually returned an ID of the user. So I went and I said, hey, go give me that ID. But in the profile, instead of loading all profiles, I want to load only the profiles that are by that user ID. But this isn't made yet. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go to the repository, and I'm going to go create this. And this is how simple this is. I'm going to say this is going to give me back a set of profiles. This is the method name, and I'm going to pass in a long of an ID. This right here created that SQL command to go in and grab all the profiles by user ID. It created it for me. I don't have to do anything. It'll now only grab that. Right. Okay. Also with my user, I was showing the password. I probably don't want to show the password, so I'm going to go back here and I'm going to actually delete the hash password. It just shows me my username. What else? Profile. I think I have everything. Let me rerun this. You're right that you could have one profile. If you're absolutely right. So my original thought was maybe I wanted to make like a running profile and a swimming profile, or maybe I wanted to do my household. And so I could do each of us in the household. So my user gives me access to all of my users in my household. There's many different ways to do that. Like, hopefully, when I go here, you see how it instantly made me log in? When I hit activities, when I hit tags, when I hit any of these, that filter is making me go to the login. So I'm going to try to log in. It logged me in. Again, with my application and my cookies, I have a J session, that cookie value. When I go to profiles, I haven't added a profile yet. So I have it here. What's interesting is if I have a user, let's add another user. P-Hodges2. P-Hodges2. If I go to profiles and I add a profile, and I now put it under P-Hodges2 and I hit save, it does not show up here. But if I checked my database, it would be in my database. So if I go to log out, so this is P-Hodges at this thing. If I go log out, and I don't know if you noticed, but my J session, when I logged out, it changed over here, my session ID. Let's see if this created me. Profile. You see now it has this one and not the other one. So you are able to grab the user from the session and actually do commands based on that. The activities and tags are the same way. I just made this logout button. Again, my J session is right here. I click this, it changes it. It gets rid of my session. I'm trying to show you the possibilities of what you can do more than making you memorize what you have to do. I think if you copied and pasted the stuff from LaunchCode and then have learned at least a little bit about this on maybe potential edits that you can make, I give you full authority that once you get something working, go ahead and break it again and get it back working again. If you can do that, I think you've got what you need out of this. Any other? Yeah, set just means more than one instance is coming back. And then set, yeah, if there are multiple things coming back that are, I could have used a list, to be honest, because all the profiles have to be unique with a unique ID anyway. So I could use list or set for that. What did I even hit? No, the repository. Yeah, I could do a list here. It's the same thing. That'd be the same thing. Any other things before I at least stop the recording?